Welcome. All right, there we go. All right. Hello and welcome to my Exploring North Carolina, America, Indian History Timeline episode. I know that was a lot, but it actually is a title. Now, I'm your quirky ASF Hood genealogist, Lenora, and welcome to the My History Verified Ancestry and Genealogy Research channel. Thank you to my subscribers and returning viewers and those joining for the very first time. Please hit the like, share, and subscribe button. It means a lot to me that I receive the feedback, and try sharing it and subscribing if you haven't already subscribed. Now, let's get into the reason for today's episode. I'm going to discuss the east coast of North America, specifically North Carolina. And I'm so excited to share this timeline with you all because I have known about it for over a year now. It's that important. I've shedded tears and anger about this timeline because ironically, it showed up while researching my maternal great grandmother's lineage. I discussed this timeline yesterday and attempted to, click the link, pull it up, but it went to this page is missing page. You know how you get that error message and what you're looking for isn't there, but you've seen it a lot of times, so it's not by mistake that you got there. I actually saved it within my ancestry tree. The timeline is going to help me reveal what actually specifically the Tuscarora or Tuscarora Lumbee tribe went through during the wars. And it also, that particular timeline was going to tie in some information, I believe, was to connect me by the surname, location, and DNA and other information that I kind of got boggled up in there. It's all related to the burial remains at the Maryland Catoctin Iron Furnace site, located again in Maryland. Now, I will briefly share as a reminder, but I would like to just get back to the North Carolina timeline, my true ancestry findings, and my family relationships that led to the Indian tribes that I plan on sharing with you today. Let's go ahead and get into this. Now, for starters, what did I do yesterday? We went to the Catoctin Furnace Historical Society website, and I kind of showed you the furnace in which it is stated that my ancestors worked at that iron furnace and their remains were found in 1979. I'm going to briefly bring that up, but I don't want to stay on this at all because I want to get into the timeline. I'm sharing that page with you now. So on your own time, you can go and check out the Catoctin Furnace. They do offer tours, and you can have a virtual tour here on their website. So that's how the furnace looks. I showed it to you yesterday. All right. So, what led me to the Cactoton iron furnace? So, I know you asked Lenora. For those of you who are new to the channel, joining me for the first time today, you're probably asking, how did I end up believing or finding out that my ancestors were at that location? All right. So, I took everyone to the My True Ancestry genetic database for ancient, I believe it's ancient classic DNA results, which means that any burial findings or any mummies, um, any let's see, historical or royalty, anything of that sort, along that timeline of like 30,000 BC or wherever, where, if they have a match for a person and wherever they fit on a timeline, well, this company will be able to match you to any of the burial remains or findings of anyone connected to your DNA. So at my true ancestry, my true ancestry, I went into the saga. So this is where I'm at here. Saga videos, new saga avatars, and Sega Ultimate. I clicked that. I didn't. I actually don't utilize this too much, and I'm gonna go ahead and let you see how this looks. I already know how it look. But what they did was come up with a video. I'm gonna play it. They came up with a video, and this video is basically a timeline of my DNA. So it's a cute little DNA. I mean, a cute little video. Remember, it's ancient and classic DNA. No one modern. Neolithic age, the late Bronze Age. And those pictures are actually my snips of my DNA that connects me to those ancestors. Some of them they won't show unless I do an upgrade, and the upgrade is in this area up at the top. I'm currently at Olympus, which is level 6. All right, so that is considered my DNA story in video form, that was prepared by my true ancestry. Okay. I'm trying to get to, I'm just trying to play around in here, let you see what is actually here. The saga map. Saga or saga. Saga is as in the video game, and the saga continues. Two different pronunciations. I play around with this. Um, I don't think I want to do it on this particular episode. There's a timeline fingerprint. It's basically like a chromosome map, except the actual your DNA matches the the ancestors and not your current DNA matches of modern time or today. All right. So I am going to go to the full detailed timeline. And this is how I came up with the research for the Cactocton iron furnace located in Maryland. And we're just going to briefly stay on this timeline here. This is not the timeline that we will be reviewing. I mean, actually, stuck on. All right, so we get to here. I think I have 25 1810 AD enslaved. And as you can see here, it says adult, but when you get down here, there's no adult. It says female. The gender is not listed here. So this particular person who I am the closest to is an enslaved adult female laborer, Cactocton iron working furnace, Antebellum, Maryland. There are a total of 25 remains that I'm connected to. I believe one at one point said youth or male. They removed that. So once I saw this is what led me to my research of the Cactocton iron furnace located in Maryland and the 5 states of Maryland, Virginia, North Carolina, Pennsylvania, I believe. Okay, so that's how I got on that. Now, remember, for those of you who are returning, I was able to take you to my ancestry tree to try to connect and show you who the ancestors would be who were in the Pennsylvania, Maryland, Virginia area during those times. The pinpoint is of actually the family relationship that I'm researching and trying to connect this to is my great grandmother, who is my mom's father's mother, which is here. It is her family that is related to the Leland Noel or Favor Noel. Leland Noel was once the mayor of, I believe he was the mayor, not the mayor, but the governor of Mississippi. And you can bet he is related to the Favor Noel, who was most recently involved in the allegedly taking of the welfare or food stamp benefits from the state of Mississippi. Okay, now pinpointing the relatives that would have been, or the ancestors that were in that area of Maryland, Pennsylvania, North Carolina, and Virginia, it has to do with these people here who were in that area. I think Noel was Virginia. Click it up. As you see, North Carolina, Virginia, Pennsylvania. I know for a fact they were in Pennsylvania. And there are surnames that are connected to specifically connected to the burial remains of the Cactotan iron furnace. Now, it is stated that, because remember, I've spoken with the archaeologist that is involved in the excavation, and then it, well, actually researching and investigating the operations of the furnace, its operators, and then those the work duties and the enslavement, and then the remains, and then the burial site, and now the location or the locating of any living family members because of reparations. That's why it's such a big, huge issue about reparations in state by state. Today, I saw something about Florida stating that they are attempting to ban permanent reparations for black, quote unquote, blacks in the state of Florida. Now, if you don't already know, Florida is where the original Israelites came on the equator, and they also traveled throughout the coast with trading and bartering. But after the Alexander the Great massacre, they were in Mexico and then to Florida. Those Indians, those Seminoles, those Muskogee Creeks are black. That's why it's a huge issue with reparations. And today, Florida is attempting to ban it. And who's been classified as black? Who's been reclassified as African American? The American Indian. And don't forget that using the term Indian and black are misnomers. They're Aborigines, indigenous to North or the Western Hemisphere, or the North and South East Coast of the Americas. All right. So remember the surnames that I told you about. Patterson is one, Martin, Johnson. Remember, oh wow, you see this Burgess? Okay, the Balfour as well. These are all the names that are mentioned as surnames connected to the remains at the Cactotan iron furnace burial sites located in Maryland. So it was a 4 to 5 state line or a state interaction between those states and the elite and the people of those states. In my tree, you see the Noel, you see the Patterson. We just saw the Burgess, you saw the Balfour. Okay, there's also Johnson and Martin. Where's the Johnson and Martin? The Brantley as well, the Brantleys. Oh, 2 more popped up, so I'll do that on another day. Now, where's my Brantley and Martins? Okay, I'll do that on another day. Now, remember that I was in Susan Parks' profile. She is my 5th great grandmother from North Carolina. I also showed you that she is a part of the Tuscarora tribe. Edward Brantley, which is her husband, married her twice so that she could end up with his estate. But she is Tuscarora. New Burns, as you see here, Nash of North Carolina, Craven County. All of those are counties and locations within North Carolina. Now, what am I doing? Trying to tie in an Indian tribe, which is the Tuscarora tribe, to the North Carolina area. So I'm going to go back now. For those of you who do not know, that I believe there are a total of let's see. There are total, I believe they're stating since 2000, according to the census, there are over 100,000 American Indians in the state of North Carolina alone. There's only one federally recognized tribe. Federally recognized. 7 state recognized tribes in the state of North Carolina, and 4 urban Indian organizations. The Kohari, the Eastern Band of Cherokee Indians, the Halawa-Saponi Indian tribe, the Lumbee tribe of North Carolina, the Moheran Indian Nation, the Occaneechi Band of the Saponi Nation, the Saponi Nation with double P, the Waccamaw Soinen are North Carolina tribes. The urban Indian organizations are Cumberland County Association for Indian People, the Gulliford Native American Association, the Metrolina Native American Association, and the Triangle Native American Society. Remember, Susan Parks is Tuscaroran. A European married her. How did she get to be, what is her date of birth? 1883. This is around the war, at the time that the wars were going on. All right, trying to get back to where I was at. Now, if we scroll down some, you will see in blue under the blue captions there. You see near North Carolina tribes, and if you scroll down, you'll see Lumbee tribes of North Carolina. Then I'm going to connect myself to that Lumbee tribe of the Tuscaroras. Yesterday, if you haven't looked at my video, you will see that in my tree that Susan Parks is stated to be Tuscarora. Okay, and if you look in the tree, you see a lot of the surnames that are connected to the Tuscarora tribe, and also to the elite and those that waged war on the Indians of North Carolina. Here you will see a North Carolina tribal and urban communities map. I'm going to blow it up a lot, as much as I can. And I am utilizing the ancient North Carolinas, Carolinians website. It is a virtual museum of North Carolina archaeology. The page that I am on, the Indian heritage, they have an overview. They discuss the region and the time and the modern tribes of today. Today, still to this day, the Lumbee tribe is still in existence. The Tuscarora tribe, as you can see, is not listed. What I saw about the Tuscarora wars and the letters that I read from the chiefs to the to Congress or to Andrew Jackson regarding the atrocities being raged against the tribes was hideous. But this is North Carolina. There's a breakdown of the counties and where the tribes are today. This was originally, I think, going up here, there's a river somewhere here. This was originally Tuscarora land, but it appears that they didn't give it to the Tuscarora, so they had to reinvent themselves more than likely and became the Lumbee. There's a lot of slack being thrown at the Lumbee, saying that they are not really a Tuscarora tribe. And we know that people are able to buy their way into the tribe, but you have to understand that the Tuscarora went through a lot of HELL for their existence, trying to get them to stop taking the land, unaliving their men and chiefs, unaliving their women and children, and taking their women as prisoners, and taking everybody as prisoners in wars, and definitely taking the women and the girls and having their way. Right? So this is they're stating that in red, the eastern band of Cherokee is in the tip of, what would that be? The central western part of North Carolina is tip, which I believe is touching what? Georgia and Tennessee, Ohio. We already saw the Lumbee tribe here in the turquoise. In the green, the Kahari tribe. In the royal blue is the Hawa Saponi tribe. They're in Halifax. And we have other tribes. The only tribe that's federally recognized in the state of North Carolina is the Eastern Band of Cherokee Nation. How do I know? It says it's right here. See here, you see that star, that asterisk, and it's italicized, federally recognized. Then I searched for that asterisk. I went up, there's the asterisk. The only tribe that is federally recognized in the state of North Carolina is the Eastern Band of Cherokee Nation. They actually played the Cherokee against the Yamasee and the Tuscarora and the Lenape, and the Saponi, and the Oneida, and many, many others, the Shawnee, the Powhatan, because while they were waging war, the Aborigines were going wherever they could go for safety and to increase in numbers. And all they did was play each tribe against each other. And for us to have people today that are arrogant with their privileges, while many lost their ancestors, how they lost them, how they lost the land and the resources. Do you know that in North Carolina, underneath this land was gold? Gold. Tobacco. And other resources. Gold. All right, so that is, now remember, I want you to focus on the Lumbee tribe. Don't you forget that, because I'm going to bring it back up. Now let's go into this time before I go into somewhere else. Now they have a timeline that's trying to say the Paleoindian was there in 14,000 to 8,000. Now, when they're mentioning the Paleoindian, they're trying to say the Native American, and the Native American is not a Mississippian. He's not an East or South Coast Indian. He is of Siberian, Ukraine, Germany, mixed with Asian and Indigenous and African, creating both a Mexican and a Native American. They were not on the East Coast. Neither the Native American and the Mexican was not on the East Coast. A Mexican is a mixed, beginning with as a black, quote unquote, brown person, African, Israelite, that mixed with a Spaniard and a Mongolian and an Asian. If you don't believe me, do your own research. All right. It says, people reacted with awe and surprise when they first learned that North Carolina was settled more than 10,000 years ago. This is pre-Columbus, right? 10,000 years ago is pre-Columbus. Few realize that the history given in an elementary and high school curricula only scratched the surface of the real but largely unwritten history of our state. How early North Carolinians lived and how they changed through the centuries cannot be discovered from lost documents and the written word. Instead, this history has to be painstakingly reconstructed from the fragmentary and fragile record left buried beneath our feet. The shovel and trowel of the archaeologist must be used to recover and decipher our unwritten past. And as genealogists, whether you are certified or degreed, or you're the family historian, this is what you're doing as well. Archaeologists working in North Carolina recognize 5 major cultural traditions from earliest to latest. These are Paleo-Indian, Archaic, Woodland, Mississippian, and Historic, which would be the pre-colonial periods and historic periods. It states that these traditions reflect general cultural patterns and changes through time. In some regions of the state, a tradition may begin at one point in time while in another region, the same tradition may start later or earlier. And this is coming from the UNC College of Arts and Science, their research laboratories of archaeology, University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill in North Carolina. I like this page, but let's not forget about the Lumbee. Now, give me a second. Now, I've had a lot of pain when I reached when I'm researching, or when I first found out about the Tuscarora tribe. There was a lot of pain um, upon reading about the Susan Park ancestor, because something didn't seem right, and it all fell in place. It appears that because I think her lineage stopped, and there wasn't anything behind it, so it was a brick wall, which often leads me to believe that the person may be indigenous or an African or a slave. And a slave can be free or unfree. They can be African or a prisoner of war, or a Indian or Aborigine, indigenous, or they can be white. But when there's a brick wall, I know something is not right in my own tree. Because if they are all European, the records just flow like dominoes. The information flows like dominoes. But when it stops, a person that doesn't have the courage, or they're stuck on being just an African or a slave, you're going to stay stuck there, because that's not always the case. The person could be Aborigine, indigenous to the Americas, pre-colonial, BC. So you have to step out of your box when you're doing the research. Now, let me give you a little information about the Tuscarora people. About the Tuscarora people. Okay, not that one. Now, to bring you up to par, the Tuscarora are an indigenous people of the northeastern woodlands and Canada, because they had to flee up to Canada and North Carolina, and New York, when war was raged on them, and the United States. They are Iroquois, Native American. We don't use the term Native American because Native American applies to identity theft of the Siberians or mixed persons that were not on the north and southeast coast. They are considered to be First Nations people based in New York and Ontario, as I stated. Now, prior to European contact, the Tuscarora lived in the Carolinas, which is North Carolina, along the Roanoke. And I'm going to bring up that map. Oh, wow, I thought I had it. Okay, there it is there. Oh, my stuff is freezing up, but I'm gonna still keep going. Trying to bring that map up for you so you can follow along with me. Okay, so this how I know when stuff start going on. They're blocking me from being able to pull up my stuff. This started like in November. All right, so this is the map of North Carolina. I'm gonna go ahead and try to zoom in a little bit for you. That's out. So you see Georgia. Well, let's start to the left. You see Alabama, Georgia. As we go closer to the Atlantic Ocean, South Carolina. Above Alabama is Tennessee. Above Tennessee is Kentucky. If we go to the right of Kentucky, there's Virginia. We go down, there's North Carolina, and below North Carolina is South Carolina. So I'm going to go ahead and zoom in to North Carolina. You see where that red marker is, that indicator. That's where we're going to be. So use your eyes as much as you can. Perhaps you probably know a lot more about North Carolina than I do. I see Cherokee, so I'm going to mention here to the upper right of the map there. So I'm going to be mentioning that there's Chapel Hill. Remember, my ancestor was, I believe, from Chapel Hill. All right, so let me go back to what I was doing. All right, so while you're looking at the map, I'm going to try to pinpoint where the Tuscarora tribe lived in the Carolinas. Along the Cherokee, the Neuse, Nuyus, Tar, T-A-R, and Pamlico rivers, Pamlico. So anything in blue would be rivers. If I zoom in, I'm not gonna, because I don't know the area of North Carolina. All of those names are gonna zoom out. It's gonna be more names that I can handle. All right. So after the Tuscarora War of 1711 through 1713. Now, on your own time, you have to find the timelines for the Indian Wars. When you have time, Google the Indian Wars. And you'll know at one point they begin to wage war. Now, the Tuscarora Wars are going on in 1711 through 1713. At what point did Christopher Columbus make his third trip to the Americas, to that East Coast? Remember that Balboa came first, Leif Erikson came first, and Columbus came 3 times. And when they came, they hit Plymouth Rock, Virginia, coming friendly, and then fighting for the land, taking over. They knew who they were seeing when they came. They knew that those were the Israelites. And they came to take over the land. If the king of Prussia sends Greg Jones to find out if they were really the Israelites, don't you believe that after the the massacre that Alexander the Great did with the uh, Tyrians, which is the Israelites that came here, or wherever Egypt is, because I'm not pigeonholing myself in. They knew who was on that East Coast, because by this time the Spaniards had already went to Mexico, where the Israelites were originally at. When they began to mate with the original Israelites who were brown, quote unquote black, today we're called African Americans, they mixed with them, giving them more power, giving them more people that would have their ideology. And then they went upward with the Mongolians and Asians and down, and that's why they have that Southwest, taking over where Khalifa was in California, or New Mexico, where Israelites were as well. Florida, the Seminoles, that's why they went there. All right. So on your free time, think about, go over those rivers, look at those, get familiar with the names. I've spoken to a lot of people where they're saying that their teenagers are watching. I had a lot of questions last week from a lot of teenagers asking me questions. So get familiar with learning to go. If you cannot understand a word and you need to know the meaning of a word or a city or a name, you Google it. You pull out a dictionary. If you still have the physical copies of the actual dictionary books and encyclopedias, almanacs. When I was a kid, the almanacs were out. Know why? Because it taught you how to cultivate the land, when to buy seeds, when to plant the seeds. Those are things that were already in our culture, and they took that away. Just like horses. Horses were readily available. I guess if you can purchase or trade, they took those away and made those luxury. The lands, they took that away. Camping, made that a luxury. Right? So pull out those dictionaries and look, Google and look up everything you don't understand, what you don't know, to help edify your and create growth in your knowledge base. All right, so their lands were claimed, the Tuscarora lands were claimed by English colonists in North Carolina and Virginia. Who's from Virginia? The Shawnee tribes, the Pamunkey tribes. Pamunkey, when we think about Pamunkey, Pamunkey leads us back to where? The Mayans. Copan. Same people. Who are they? In my tree, they are the siblings of Pocahontas. That is on, that's my mother's, not her father's, but her mother's people are the descendants of Pocahontas' sister, the Powhatans, the Shawnee, Lenape. I think the Lenape. And many, many more. And I'll get into that. All right. So after the Tuscarora War of 1711 to 1713, against English colonists, the Indians became allies. And those that survived the wars, they left North Carolina. They migrated north to Pennsylvania and North and actually New York. Within 90 years, not being federally recognized, being disrespected. Why? Because they waged war. They didn't give up. That's why you don't hear a lot about the Tuscarora, as well as the Chickasaw. The Tuscarora aligned with the Haudenosaunee, which is the Iroquois, as a silent in New York. Why? Because they share the ancestral linguistic, meaning they spoke the same language. Alphabets were the same. And then their cultural connections were the same. 1722, the Oneida accepted the Tuscarora tribe in its Six Nation of the Iroquois Confederacy. So the great Tuscarora tribe, who the Indian chief kept communicating with Congress, begging them to stop with the wars, tricking them out of land with treaties, backstabbing them with other tribes, especially the Cherokee and the Yamasee at times, until everyone figured out what they were doing. By that time, it was too late. In Virginia, Pocahontas's tribe was obliterated, not annihilated, because I'm still here. But she got taken and kidnapped and went overseas, taken overseas. The story of that is hideous as well. This is how dirty they were playing. We're talking about people that were originally convicts, fleeing their own country for religious purposes, overzealous religion, they weren't just trying to avoid taxation. They were inmates and convicts and owed debts in their own countries. And in those own countries, they were poor. Those countries were poor. It is the Amerindian in the North Americas who built the civilizations. There, taught them how. They traded, they bartered, they had resources, coins, gems. So with the Tuscarora, it's sad what happened to them, how they were mistreated. It's very sad. Now, after the American Revolution, which was around 1776, the Tuscarora, again, allied with colonists who shared the reservation with the Oneida before finally gaining their own. Today, the Tuscarora Nation is in New York. They fled to New York. It originally finally became federally recognized. Now remember, the Tuscarora tribe is not federally recognized in North Carolina, even though they were prominent in North Carolina pre-colonial. There were Tuscaroras who tried to ally with the British in the American Revolution. And those that did got freedom in Ontario. They went there. They didn't even bother with the United States anymore after that. They are considered to be a part of the Six Nation of the Grand River First Nation. Once again, only the tribes in New York and Ontario are federally recognized by the government. It is stated that after those that went to New York, no longer considered those in North Carolina as members of the tribal nation. That's why it's so much mess where they're fake. They're not real. They're fake. Well, all the treaties that they went through and all the backstabbing, do you see how it's playing out? Now remember, there's more than 5 recognized tribes. There are, let's say that's more than 5 tribes, period, that is being that everybody seems to roll off the tip of their tongue. I'm gonna tell you what my great, well, not my great, but my aunt says, who's 70 some years old, with her great grandmother being full-blooded Chickasaw. But she remembers of her great grandmother who spoke no English being ripped out of her house and sent to Indian schools. Being forced to abandon the tongue and culture. Land was taken. This Chickasaw. And they also had to flee into the mountains. Her, my 70-year-old aunt who's still living. So this, finding these things out, especially at I think it was the first of the month, December. Oh my goodness. I had a time. Not only that, when I did that interview, they bunked my computer and my TV, decreasing or suppressing views. That if you look at that interview, even though I taped it, re-recorded it, did a whole lot of stuff, the sound is messed up. But they haven't stopped anything. That's why I'm gonna keep going. So my views have been suppressed. This subject is serious. Because if you still in 2023 to this day still have people talking about, so we're not giving you reparations. If you notice, no one has been deported. These African, quote unquote, African Americans haven't been deported anywhere. Unless you know who they are. They can't deport them because it's their land. And the descendants of the Indians, the Aborigines, indigenous to the north and southeast coast, are privy to those treaties, unlawful treaties at that. So that's the reason why they don't want to give anyone reparations. We're not even them. Meaning to say that we're not evil and cruel like them. All right, I'm going to read that again. After migrating, them forcing the tribes out of the land during the 18th century, the Tuscarora in New York no longer considers those remaining in North Carolina as members of the tribal nation. Since the late 20th century, some North Carolina individuals claiming Tuscarora ancestry formed unrecognized tribes. Just think about that. I'm going to get into that timeline. Remember that blount that I showed you yesterday, BLOUNT, on that signed my ancestors' first birth certificate? I told you about the Moravian missionaries. And I'm going to go into this timeline and I'm going to take you to it so we can read it together. First of all, let me get you to how, Lenora, you keep talking about you as Tuscarora and Lumbee. Now, when did I find this? Ironically, last year. So I'm going to show you. Take you to my true ancestry once again. All right, waiting for you to come with me. Now, I think it's population. They bumped me out. I don't know why they bumped me out. Let me see if you can still hear me. Yep, okay. All right, so I have to go in and see where that is. It's not gonna be there. Let's see though. Maybe. Nope, I don't want that. All right, so here's something that you can look at. Contradiction. I clicked something, but I didn't want to land here. It says currently you have no ancient America samples. It's a lie. If the Africans haven't taken any DNA tests and they can't afford any tests, if the Israelis or everyone in Israel is prohibited from taking a test, why do you think so? Because they're not going to be connecting to any of the Ramesses and the Cleopatrians, the Mayans and the Aztec. It's the African American who they call themselves hating on and didn't want to mix with, who have the full blood. Now look at here. Our tests do not detect you have. I'm sorry. It says note. Our tests do detect you have some indigenous ancestry. Now I'm going to take you back to another site on another day to show you I have more than enough indigenous ancestry. That's why it's important for you to, what if they snatch all of this away? What if they go in and tamper with all of this? That's why it's important for you to do your genealogy and get it on paper. And I'm going to show you something tomorrow on the episode to help you compile that information and get it all together and, put it together in some type of formation. All right, so where am I going? Hurry up and get where you got to go. Okay, hold on. It's not where I want to go either, but you see the Amerindian is there. Confirmation. It's about confirmation. No matter what ancestry.com trying to stop on their end. Okay. Now I am trying to get to my Lumbee people, which is probably in the saga. No, it's not. It's here. Okay, so I am going to zoom this out. What am I at? 20%. Okay, I'm zooming it out. All right, now look at this. Look at here. Look at here. Now it states that this is my closest genetic modern populations, not ancient, not classic, but my modern populations. The Lumbee tribe is the Igbo Israelites that are in Africa. There are not too many of them. And Nigeria is not Igbo. They are Yoruba. This is coming from an African that told me this nearly 18 years ago. He said they don't even socialize with the Igbo. He says not that many of them. The Igbo are the Israelites. So all that Nigerian that they throwing at us and saying we're Nigerian, where? I've already showed you I've showed you my stuff. I showed you probably 10% of my stuff. And it's not adding up. All right. Now, come on over here. You see that Australian? I'm gonna tell you my true ancestry is on point for me because I've already found my Australian blood. It's actually, I believe, on that same line as Susan Parks. Then there. Okay. Then we go over here. You see Mexican. I'm gonna blow it up for you. A Mexican. Who do you think that would be? That's those Aztecs. Originally, the Lumbee. Originally, the Tyrians. Originally, the Israelites, fleeing from Alexander the Great and persecution. Then we got the islands. Go back over here to the right. Puerto Rico. Puerto Rico. Puerto Rican. That's another island. Then down here is another island. What is that? Castanoan. We go down. Jordanian. Moroccan, Egyptian, Ethiopian. Oh, you can't see it. Egyptian Jew. I think you can now. That piece. All right, I'm gonna raise it up a little bit more for you. Okay, now do you see it? But I bet you see that Lumbee tribe, don't you? Ironically, I saw this last year at the same time that all of a sudden I contacted the archaeologists for the Cactotan iron furnace ancestors. I didn't even know anything about any remains that they were excavating and researching and trying to find the relatives. That is when I found out November of last year. Ironically, all of this came up. But you see that Lumbee tribe, don't you? That's the Tuscarora tribe. So when somebody lying to me about the Lumbee is a fake tribe, really? You think? They had to take on new names because the government wouldn't recognize them. It was not cool to be an Indian. It wasn't even acceptable. You got dark-skinned blacks that would talk about people that said that they were Indian. I remember seeing the buffalo nickel. I remember seeing the fringes. I remember seeing the suede pouches or the leather pouches being worn in the 70s, or the headbands around our heads. Slowly wiping out our culture. thinking by putting in the drugs and the gangs and the movies about stripping to get you thrown off, throw in some twerking, all of that stuff to get you to not focus on who you are till we get to the point of 2019. Teach you to not talk about politics. Remember that phrase? Oh, I don't talk about politics at work. I don't talk about salary. I don't talk about religion. I don't talk about money. Well, look where it has landed you. I don't like history. I don't read that type of stuff. I don't get into all of that. I go to work. I don't get. Look where it has led us. Because some of those nerds that was sitting at home, like me, was already reading the APAs and those magazines. I was taking them home from hospitals where I worked. If they tossed them in the garbage, I sure had it. Those magazines and those ICD-9 books, that's how I learned a whole lot of stuff. So when 2019 came, I wasn't shocked. When I read word for word, I wasn't shocked. Now everything is coming into play. And only the weak is going to have a hard time. If they're open to listen, then they can get the elevation. Information is key, because these are their phrases since 2002. Information and content is king. These are their phrases. You thought they were saying it for nothing? No one should have a computer or a smartphone. And I wrote this when I was on LinkedIn 20 years ago. Whenever LinkedIn came out, I said the strongest thing, the power that the quote unquote black person, black male, MALE, will become powerful from these devices. And here we are. Now, don't forget that Lumbee tribe over there. There you go. No, over there, yeah. Like my great grandmother said, the one we researching, not the Susan, but her third great grandchild. I had to go on over there, and you see that Lumbee tribe up there. You going on over there. Now let me expand this some more. Zoom in so you can see information I got for you. Open your mind and your brain so you can get this information, baby. Yeah. You see this? Don't play with me. I haven't even looked up the UZBEK or the SERRANO yet. I haven't looked up the BASHKIR. I will. I know who the pygmies are. They're stating that the pygmies were over here in the United States. I've tried blowing this up so that I can actually see those overlapping markers, but I can't see them. But you see the Lumbee tribe. Do your research, people. Do your research. Do your research. This is how you shut a person up. All that arguing with them about who you are, baby, I can go on all day long with this. I can pull up some stuff on you. You see that Lumbee tribe? That's how I'm connected to the Tuscarora tribe. They have right there. right, right there. Now, I'm going to proceed with that timeline I told you about. Let's go. I'm going to take you to that timeline so you can see exactly what I was trying to get at yesterday, but they changed the link. This is it right here. I'm going to turn this music down some so you can hear me. Down a little more. And we're going to go over this timeline together. All right, are you ready? Now, this timeline is a powerful timeline, even though I don't agree with the first two lines, the first of 40,000 to 15,000 BC, because they're trying to say that the Indian came from the Bering Strait, Asia. It's a lie. They know exactly where the Indians came from. Nobody from the Bering Strait was even on that freaking north and southeast coast. They probably was in Alaska, because remember, Eskimos used to be taught to us in the 70s and the 80s. By 1980, one or two or three, they told us that we couldn't use the term Eskimo no more in the schools. Our teachers told us. The little me who was always inquisitive said, oh, it's going to come back. And my teacher she was down to earth, bowdy. When something would come up, like the ratio of men to women, at that time when she brought that up, that was 7-1. Seven women, seven quote unquote black women to one black male. That was the ratio in 1983. That is the beginning of the jails being created, more divisions added to the jail system. What else was brought up? The globe. The maps and globes were removed from our classroom, and we were told we couldn't use certain maps anymore. It was a different land masses that were removed from the globe. And this happened one time. 3 different globes and maps were replaced in our classroom during the 8th grade. This is how serious this is. So anybody that's talking about not teaching your children or grandchildren or your nieces and nephews in a school system, and then talking about no reparations, or woke comes to die, or come to be unalive, not my words. This is serious. Now, the timeline is being brought to you by the North Carolina Museum of History. It is a Smithsonian affiliate. Again, the timeline. North Carolina, American Indian history timeline, pre-16th century American Indian history, 40,000 through 15,000 BC. That means 15,000 years before Christ was born. People migrate to North America from Asia at irregular intervals by way of the Bering Land Bridge. The Asians did not know how to navigate, so they definitely didn't come here in the 15,000s or the 40,000s. They had no idea about boats or sailboats or navigation. All right, so it's questionable. 10,000 through 8,000 BC, Paleoindian period. American Indians are nomadic. and hunt large animals for food. They were not paleo. They were builders of pyramids, columns, apartment complexes. As I pointed out to you about the Mayans, they built apartment complexes, sacred worshiping structures. So they were not nomadic. They hunted, but they were not considered hunters and gatherers. All right, I'm going to read that again. Paleo-Indian period. American Indians are nomadic and hunt large animals for food. Who, the bison that they destroyed? The American Indians' main food source? Any wild game and plants for and herbs for medicinal purposes forbidden. They also eat small game and wild plants. They leave no evidence of permanent dwellings in North Carolina. You see that lie? Do your research. They leave no evidence of permanent dwellings in North Carolina. Oh, really? 8,000 to 1,000 BC, archaic period. American Indians moved from big game hunting to small game hunting, fishing, and collecting wild plants. These people changed their patterns of living because of the changing climate in North America. Now, that is the reason why they left Copan area or South America was for environmental purposes. So they went up into like California. Now remember, you have populations of people. Do you think that they're going to stay in one area or they're going to venture off? Because we today, we can be with our family and we know that a world exists out. We are trying to take our family and go elsewhere to be the adult and the responsible adult that we know we can be. Which is why you had Khalifa in California. You had tribes in New Mexico. You had tribes in Texas. You had tribes in Florida. And now through the United States, the now United States. 8,000 BC, possibly this early American Indians began to use the site in present-day Wilson County for either permanent or seasonal habitation. I'm seeing changes to this timeline, but I'm going to keep on reading. 1200 BC, southeastern Indians began growing squash gourds. You think they're just now learning about squash? They want us to believe that they're just now finding out about squash gourds when this is the land of milk and honey. Everything is here. Continue, 1000 BC through AD 1550, after Christ was crucified. Woodland culture, American Indians settle in permanent locations, usually beside streams, and practice a mixed substances lifestyle of hunting, gathering, and some agriculture. It's funny because they were trading. They were trading. They create pottery and also develop elaborate funeral procedures such as building mounds to honor their dead. Mounds predate the 1000 BC that they have here. predate it. So I don't know why they added that, but they did. That's why you have to know your history. 200 BC, southeastern Indians began growing corn. That's funny. Illinois, which is Indian territory, grew more corn than any other state. This is what was supposedly taught to us in 1983. In my school, we knew about the Indians. We visited the mounds in the 70s or 80s. I was like 3 or 4, but we visited those as field trips, including the Little Red Schoolhouse. Remember Indiana, Northwest Indiana, Gary, that's Indian Territory. Maryville, Indian Territory. Sherrillville, Indian Territory. Chicago Heights, Indian Territory. Portage Park, Indian Territory. Aroma Park, Indian Territory. Crete Monique, Indian Territory. Richton Park, probably already said that already. South Holland. South Holland is a Dutch town. Who knows what it was before that? Calumet Park, Calumet City, Indian Territory. Like the Calumet powder or the baking powder. That's why that Indian was on there. Des Plaines, Wilmette, Waukegan, Indian Territory. Niles, Skokie, Bourbonnais, Kankakee, Momence. Chicago, Indian Territory. Know your history. Know what happened to your ancestors or other people's ancestors. AD 700 through 1550, Mississippian culture, American Indians create large political units called chiefdoms. Oh, they're trying to say that they didn't understand structure of governmental or chiefs until the 700s to the 1550s. After now, do you understand what they're trying to say this here? Do you know how many tribes there were? You know when you pregnate, you know how they told us the story of how the quote unquote slave woman was on the plantation and she became pregnant and she had a heap of children to help sharecrop the land or help with the land that do you understand how things are only supposed to be for their benefit and then reduce you to a minority, which is another lie. All right, united people under stronger leadership than the woodland cultures have. Towns become larger and last longer. People construct flat top pyramidal mounds to serve as foundations for temples. Oh, you're trying to say they just now doing this in the 700s to the 1550s when mounds and pyramids predate this date? Again, pyramidal mounds to serve as foundations for temples, mortuaries. They were already doing the temples and the mortuaries and the apartment buildings. Chief houses and other important buildings. Towns are usually situated between streams and surrounded by defensive structures. They want you to believe that people were in teepees too. You notice they ain't mentioned those teepees because that was a lie. We were building structures. Excuse me. Also, many groups of American Indians lived in the area now called North Carolina, which is an Indian name. These include the Chawanoki, the Croatoan. Oh, wait a minute. Did you see this right here? Is that? Come on. Did you see? I'm waiting for this to get highlighted on your end. Wait a minute. Let me go on back to my true. Hold on. Oh, no, it's not the same. Okay. Well, I got ahead of myself. I'm sorry. All right. So I thought that was that. Which the Costanoan is an island, I believe. Okay. So the Croatoan, the Hadaras, the Moradak, the Sekatan, I believe that's Succotan, I bet. Uh, the Wepamoki, the Makapunga, the Pomilko, Pamlico. I bet that has to do with the South America, with the Pamunke as well. Kori, Nusi River, Tuscarora, Meharan, Cherokee, Cape Fear, Catawba, Shakori, Sispaha, Suguri, Wakama, Waxaw, Wakan, Shawa, Eno, Keawi, Akanichi, Saponi, and Tuleo Indians. That's what the Indians are called during the 700 through the 1550. During AD 1492, Italian explorer, after his third trip, Christopher Columbus leads expeditions for Spain to explore new trade routes in the Western Atlantic Ocean. This results in European contact with native peoples in the Caribbean, which is the same people from the Caribbeans, the Haiti, the Dominicans, South America, Belize, Guatemala, Brazil, Barbados, Dominica Republic, St. Kitts, Nevis. Virgin Islands. They are the same Indians. All they did was traveled between the islands. This is a fact. Pre-colonial. Not Africans brought there to live after BC. Pre-BC. This results in European contact with native peoples in the Caribbean and South America, creating a continuing and devastating impact on their cultures. 16th century American Indian history, 1540, a Spanish expedition led by Hernando de Soto explores the western portions of present-day North Carolina looking for gold. I told you, gold was on the land. De Soto and his men visit Indian communities and probably introduce smallpox and other deadly European diseases to the Aborigines population native to that land. 1566 through 1567, Spanish explorer Juan Pardo seeking gold. Now, do you know where a Spanish man comes from? He comes from Spain. Spanish is a language. Hispanic is nothing more than a misnomer used because after the Spanish mixed with that indigenous, the black man today, and then Mongolian and the Asian created that Mexican who speaks Spanish. Spanish explorer Juan Pardo, seeking gold, leads an expedition through what is now western North Carolina. Pardo visits the Catawba, the Wateree, and the Saxapawa Indians. By 1584, Sir Walter Raleigh sends explorers Philip Amadas and Arthur Barlow to North America in search of potential colony sites. They already know that they're there. That's 20 years later. You know why? Because there were the natives to that area massacred them for trying to take over their land and their women. They waged war on the natives, and the natives fought back because it wasn't their culture to wage war if there was no need to. Continue with 1584 dates. At Waunakee Island, the explorers meet Native American chief. I'm going to reread that. At Waunakee Island, the explorers meet Aborigine Indigenous chief Winjania. You see how chief is lowercase. That is to remove the status from him. That's why if you have this type of stuff in your tree, it is very, very important to uphold your ancestors who fought in these wars. And find the site excellent for settlement. They returned to England with 2 Indians, Manteo and Wachis, who learn English and are used to create publicity for Raleigh's colony. In 1585, the first English settlement is established at Waunakee Island. I showed you on the map where Waunakee was. And remember, an island has to be totally covered with water for it to be, or surrounded by water in order for it to be an island. And Ralph Lane is appointed governor. Why? Because they've already began fighting the Indians. But now this is something I must point out. In order for them to unalive the Indians, because they were told many times, because certain people would go back to the royalty and let them know how that person who was sent to lead the expedition, how he treated those that they encountered, the Indians. So many times they were asked to abort the missions. But because they were so greedy, and a lot of them are royalty, as you can see in 1584, Sir Walter Raleigh. You know how many of those are in my tree? Sir this, lady that. When they reported back to the royalty, they would exaggerate and say that, oh, the Indians unalived our men. In order for them to get the men to fight off the Indigenous and the support to fight off the Indigenous, they had to make those lies to get that assistance, get them angry. We got people that do type of stuff like that today. They lie to other people. They might not like a person, and then to get them not to like that person too, they lie about them, talk about them, to get them on their side so that they can have more physical manpower, more power to help spiritually take that person down, or whatever, more than one brain together, or more than one set of fists together to take that person down. That's how they were able to get the weapons, the funding for the troop, more manpower, soldiers, money put into weaponry. Now remember, the iron furnace began to make what? Cannonballs. 1585. The first English settlement is established at Waunakee Island, and Ralph Lane is appointed governor. The Waunakee Indian people, some of whom initially welcomed the colonists, began to see the English as a drain on food and other resources. 1586, Ralph Lane leads an expedition into the North Carolina in search of gold and other precious metals. Cherokee Indians warn inland tribes about the English, but Lane makes an alliance with the Chawanaki. You see the alliances. I'm gonna convince one tribe to like me and help me, and this is how the tribes were infiltrated. This is how the land was taken over, because it was different tribes that aligned with whoever was the mightiest foreigner at that time, because it happened state by state and tribe by tribe. It happened in Illinois, it happened in Indiana, it happened in Chicago with the Potawatomi tribes and other tribes. All right. So who hoped to use the English against their enemies? I'm going to reread that again. Roanoke Indians warn inland tribes about the English, but Lane makes an alliance with the Chawanaki, who hope to use the English against their enemies, the Tuscarora. The Tuscarora is not liked, like the Chickasaw. And as my aunt says, many people were thrown into the tribe of Chickasaw. I mean, not Chickasaw, Cherokee. She said that's why the first thing that they say is, "Oh, I'm Cherokee," because they don't know. They were forced to take on those tribal names. Chief Wagena plots to get rid of the English settlers, and Lane has him killed or unalived. I'm reading, but I'm not reading that quick where I'm, correcting this. All right. So once this chief tries to protect that settlement, he does what he can to get rid of the English settlers. Somehow Lane, who is a European Englishman, finds out, and they take him out. Sir Francis Drake arrives at Roanoke Island, so he's coming back from England, and takes most of the colonists back to England, leaving an exploring party. By this time, the English is finding out the British, who was funding the trip, approving the trip, finds out that this is going on and comes back to the States, not the States yet, but comes back and get their colonists and take them back to England. It's stated possibly Drake also leaves Africans and some American Indians. Well, it says, and South American Indians that he captured from the Spanish. Now, we get people like the Moors saying that they were here. Now, something that came up in my mind the other day about that. I'll think of it. Okay, so think about when all of those cartoons and movies, there's one black man that the Europeans are telling what to do. The Moor, that's a Moor. That pirate is a Moor. They're never in leadership. But today, they're arguing and saying they were the leaders of everything. They were the leaders of everything. All right. So it says possibly Drake also leaves Africans who they traded with. They're beginning to trade. They have Moors that come over here, and an African can be an Arab. He can be a Moroccan. He can be a Moor. He can be a North African. He can be Turkish. He can be all of that. Africa wasn't even a country. It's nowhere in the Bible. If you see Africa in the Bible, a predated Bible, I mean, not a pre, I mean, right, a predated, ancient, show me and tell me. Those South American Indians are the ones that were, those are their relatives on that north, south, east coast of the Atlantic Ocean and in Florida. On all those islands. It said that South American Indians that he captured from the Spanish. A relief ship arrives at Cherokee Island and finding none of the colonists, leaves 15 men to hold the area for England. Now, I'm going to be honest with you. I've read stories where they were left behind, but they didn't like being left behind. Because some of them, even one of them, ended up becoming quote unquote an Indian, forced to become an Indian. By 1587, Raleigh sends explorer and artist John Wright to Cherokee Island as leader of a new group of settlers, the second English attempt to settle there. The colonists find bones of the 15 men left behind in 1586, just a year or less before the 1587 expedition. Wright enlists the help of Manteo, remember that's an Indian, to build relationships with the Cherokee and Croatoan Indians. The Cherokee Indians are the Powhatans, the Shawnee, the Pamunkey, the Lenape, the Nasamon. Most of the indigenous peoples decide to let the colonists fend for themselves, meaning no more helping them. Because by this time they're seeing that they're trying to take over their land, they're trying to wage war against them. They keep bringing men to wage war against them. The 15 men that they found when they returned, they're missing that they actually fought. And someone came back and got them. Luckily, because they came and waged war on the natives that were there, the Aborigines that were there. All right. Governor Wright leaves Cherokee Island for England to acquire supplies for the colonists, with England and Spain at war. England and Spain is at war. So you have a lot of play with the Aborigines having to take the Spain side, fight against England. You have Aborigines on the English side trying to fight the Spain. You have more than one tribe or bands sticking together or fighting against. This is what was happening while land is being taken from them. So when I say backstabbing, this is what's going on. One moment they convinced them to become an ally. Next thing you know, they're trying to take it was a mess. It wasn't, it's just, it gets sad sometimes for me. All right. So with England and Spain at war, Wright cannot make an immediate return to the colony. So that's 1587. It looks like he returns in 1590. That is a 3-year time span. So that means that war between England and Spain lasted 3 years. White finally returns to Cherokee Island to find the colony deserted with little evidence of what happened to the colonists. He attempts to sail to Croatoan Island in hopes of finding some of them, but severe weather prevents him from reaching the island and he never returns to the area. Cherokee settlement is known afterward as the Lost Colony. They never found those men that they left behind. 17th century American Indian history, 1608, Jamestown leader John Smith. He is the original person who kidnapped Pocahontas. I have another timeline on him and the atrocities that he did to her. He actually got Pocahontas pregnant after he kidnapped her. He raised a ransom. He lied to the British royalty, took her to England, got her pregnant, and dumped her. Someone else married Pocahontas. She then is forced into giving up her culture, her native tongue, which some say she tried to preserve, for one day to return back to the Americas. She has to change religion, become Christian. Well, it is definitely Christian. She takes on the Christian name and she's baptized. And so is her child by John Smith. But another member of that expedition who went back to England ended up marrying her and taking her as his wife and the child as his child. While John Smith remained in the United States, purchasing land or receiving land as repayment for taking the land from the natives. And he started a tobacco factory or plantation, not factory, I'm sorry, plantation. He then selfishly goes to Pocahontas and says, okay, do you want to go visit your people? And of course, she never lost, it is stated that she never lost she hid her tongue, her culture, and she never lost who her family was because her father's a chief. So they decide to bring her back, and on her way on the boat, not far from England, somehow it's stated that she didn't make it. Now she was only 20 something. Now what happened to her that she didn't make it? They have Pocahontas as a trophy. She's like a trophy of winning because she was a chief's favorite daughter. Not no, I see you, I love you, I marry you, and you're the best. That's not how that went. So her remains were taken back to England. She never made it back to the States. And she was buried in England. Her son was there until John Smith passes away and he takes over the tobacco factories in North Carolina. What last name does he carry? Smith. They forced all of Pocahontas's family to take on Carpenter as a last name, Smith, and a few others. And I'll go over that in my tree at another time. So when people talk about Smith and all of that is Indian names, that's not true. That's not true. Those are not Indian names. All right, let me continue. Jamestown leader John Smith sends expedition to the Cherokee Island area to seek information about the lost colony. His men find nothing conclusive. By 1611, because of Spain's rivalry with England, the Spanish government develops an alliance with the Tuscarora people to monitor the Jamestown colony. See how they manipulate them and then use them to monitor the Jamestown colony while they're gone, while going to and raging war on other tribes. By 1650, that's a 39-year difference. White settlers began to move into Indian lands along the coastal sounds and rivers of North Carolina. 1653, Virginia legislator Francis Yearly hires fur trader Nathaniel Batts to explore the Albemarle, which is all in my tree, that town is all in my tree, Sound region as an area of possible settlement. Yearly agrees to purchase land from the Cherokee Indians, but passes away before his settlement is established. Batts settled along the Chowan River in a building that serves as both his home and a trading post. He trades with local Aborigine, Indigenous Americans and becomes the area's first permanent white settler. By 1661, March 1st, King Killocanon of the Uopim Indians. Never even heard of that tribe. That's how many different tribes there are. Grants land to George Durant, in the earliest grant on record in the colony. So if you have time, that's something you can look up. 1675, that's 14 years later, the Chowanock Indians attack white settlements, in Carolina. The uprising is quelled with the, quote, loss of many men, unquote. 1690s. Cherokee traders established trade agreements with the English at Charlestown, present-day Charleston, South Carolina. The Cherokee traders established trade agreements with the English. If those of you who are joining me for the first time, welcome to my channel. This is Lenore with the My History Verified channel. I am going over the North Carolina Indian timeline and correlating it to my DNA and ancestors, preferably the American Indian tribes of North Carolina and Virginia. The 18th century American Indian 18th century American Indian history. We're getting into the 1700s. The Chowanock and Repamock peoples have gradually abandoned their lands. You think they just abandoned them, or what's going on from the time that they came here to the 1700s? This is North Carolina. This is not even Virginia. Do you know what's going on in Virginia and Delaware? With the Powhatans and the Shawnee and the Pamunkey? Or the Pumacay? The Cherokee? They have gradually abandoned their lands. Today, what do you think that equates to? So yeah, that's why they don't want you to do your history. That's why they don't want blacks who have been reclassified. Now, people want to play ignorant when they know Walter Plecker had everyone who had the authority to issue documents, birth certificate, death certificates, censuses, medical reports, to change information that supports their narrative. And you have people pretending this stuff didn't happen. So today, when you have people saying they're not teaching any more Black history, they're banning books, woke is trash and garbage, and forget reparations, you'll never get it. This is why. You think this is just happening for nothing? You think this is happening for nothing? And the people that they don't like is the Black people? Do you really think this is happening for nothing? Do you really think that the Blacks were African slaves? Do you really think? Do you really think all of the descendants of all of those tribes? Because remember, it's only civilized tribes in Oklahoma. There's a few tribes recognized. Do you really think that that's all of the people? Light skin, bright skin, dark skin, brown skin? Do you really think that they're all on plantations? I mean, not plantations, but reservations? Same towns? They fled. Chicago, Milwaukee, Detroit, New York. They fled. Indiana, even though Indiana is already Indian land. We're talking about people coming from deep into those, deep in like Choctaw, which is in Mississippi. The Seminole Indians. You think they all went to Oklahoma? Because they were in Florida. Those are your Israelites. Do you really think they all went to Florida? I mean, went to or stayed in Florida or got unallowed off? Do you think everybody is still in their same little areas today? What has wiped them out is the stroke of the pen, remember? The reclassification. Those descendants are somewhere. They're not on the reservations. All right, let me finish. Where am I? I think it says. All right, 1700s. The Chawanak and the Wepamiak peoples have gradually abandoned their lands. Some have become slaves. Okay, now remember, these are Indians that are slaves or indentured servants. Now, don't walk away from this still thinking that people that were slaves were Africans. Don't walk away from this thinking that anybody that had to perform as an indentured servant was an African, meaning Ham's descendants that are over there on the land now called Africa. Those are Ham's descendants, other than the Lumbee and a few Lumbee and what's that other one? Igbo. Some of the Malawi, some I believe, fleeing during wars or taken to that land. All right, so and others have migrated south to join the Tuscarora. Rereading that again, the 1700s, the Chawanak and the Wepamiak peoples have gradually abandoned their lands. Some have become slaves or indentured servants, and others have migrated south to join the Tuscarora. Only about 500 Aborigine Indigenous remain in the Albemarle region. They fled. like the Chickasaw and the Choctaw and the Muskogee Creek. Now remember, the Muskogee Creek is down in Georgia and Alabama fighting too. They came to take the land from those Israelites. Those who were originally the Tyrians. An escaped slave serves as an architect in the construction of a large Tuscarora Indian fort near the Noosa River. So now the terminology, the labels are beginning to change. How did they become slaves? Prisoners of wars, the wars that took place for over 200 years beginning in the 1500s or whenever they came over. By the 1709, surveyor John Larson, who began a 1,000-mile journey through the colony at the end of 1700, publishes the book called A New Voyage to Carolina and describes the colony's flora and fauna and its various groups of American Indians. Larson also publishes a map of Carolina. By 1710, the settlers began moving west and south of the Albemarle area. Baron Christoph Vorey Graffenried, a leader of Swiss and German Protestants. Now you're going to see the missionaries start coming in because they need to convert these savages, because the savages, quote unquote, fought them back for taking their land and their children and their women and their men. So now they need to be converted to another religion. Look who's involved, a leader of Swiss and German Protestants. Religion and other ethnicities that were already fighting pre-BC. They established a colony in Bath County, the town called New Bern. Remember yesterday I showed you my fifth great grandmother, Susan Parks, was from New Bern. She's a Tuscarora. It is founded at the junction of the Trent and Neuse. Let's say Neuse or Neuse rivers, displacing an Indian town named Chotoka. So Chotoka is no more in existence after 1710 when the settlers came. If I'm not mistaken, something about Chotoka. There's a lot of towns, like the Chickasaw town. There's a Chickasaw town that was placed underwater, flooded. All right, I'll be going over that soon. On June 8th, the Tuscarora Indians on the Ronakee and Pamlico rivers sent a petition to the governor of Pennsylvania protesting the seizure of their lands and enslavement of their people by Carolina settlers. These are not Africans that are being enslaved. These are not Africans. These are brown-skinned, dark-skinned Indians. They did this tribe by tribe, city by city, county by county, state by state. And remember, we didn't have any states before then. It was land masses that was ran by tribes and their bands, and they ended up becoming states or colonies. By 1711, remember, we haven't even made it to 1776 yet. 1711, early September, And how did the Indians write anything? I thought they couldn't write. Now you do know that they Hebrewic and they wrote um, on the walls of the all of the pyramids and the temples. Remember, they're trying to say that they couldn't write. You see here that they were slaves. And you have Native Americans laughing and saying that they were never slaves. That's because your behinds wasn't on that north and southeast coast. You're not the same Indian. You're not even it. If so, prove the birth certificates, death certificates. Prove your timeline. All right, 1711, early September. Tuscarora captures surveyor John Lawson, New Bern founder Baron von Graffenried, and 2 African slaves. That's your Moors. Larson argues with the chief, Core Tom. That's another Indian chief of the Tuscarora. And you notice how chief is intentionally lower capped to deviate from his status. Two African slaves. Larson argues with the chief Tom and is executed. The Indians spared von Graffenried and the slaves. 1722, the Tuscarora War opens when Catachna Creek Tuscaroras began attacking colonial settlements near New Bern and Bath. Tuscarora, News, Bear River, Machapunga, and other Indians unalive more than 130 clear people. In October of 1711, Virginia refuses to send troops to help the settlers, but allocates 1,000 pounds, I guess it's British money, for assistance. So they didn't send any troops in 1711. They sent money though. 1711, 1715, in a series of uprisings, the Tuscarora attempt to drive away white clear people settlements. The Tuscarora are upset over the practices of clear traders, the capture and enslavement of Indians by clear people, and the continuing encroachment of settlers onto Tuscarora hunting grounds. 1712, January, South Carolina sends assistance to her sister colony. John Barnell, a member of the South Carolina Assembly, leads about 30 clear people and some 500 friendly Indians, mostly Yamasee, to fight the Tuscarora in North Carolina. And you're wondering why there is no connection today. You no longer have to guess how they got the land. The allies and the befriending of tribes against another tribe happened throughout the land masses here. It happened to the Potawatomi. It leads about 30 clear people and some friendly and some 500 friendly Indians, mostly Yamasee, to fight the Tuscaroras in North Carolina. A battle takes place at Narrantes, a Tuscarora fort on the Nuez River. Barnwell's troops are victorious, but are surprised that many of the Tuscarora's fiercest warriors are women. who do not surrender, quote, until most of them are put on to the sword, unquote. Tuscarora's let me get this right. Tuscarora's fiercest warriors were women. April of 1712, Barnwell's force, joined by 250 North Carolina militia men, attacks the Tuscarora at Fort Hancock. Hancock is another surname that is within my tree. On Ketchena Creek, after 15 days of battle, the Tuscarora signed a truce, agreeing to stop the war. So in 1712, the Tuscarora signed away because they brought in 250 more men to fight them. Then the tribes were Yamasee were backstabbing them. I'm going to break something else down for you. So we go to the hood. We go to black hoods. Now you know that they've been reclassified. You already read or saw my episode about the reclassification of the North and Southeast Coast Amerindian. So fast forward today, the descendants are still being reclassified, right? So now you have all of us in our communities. We are of different tribes. I'm not talking about African. We are of different tribes, mixed with probably European, Swedish, German, Irish, some, not all. So what do you think they're gonna do in those towns? I mean, those like communities and neighborhoods? Fight. That's what their ancestors did. They didn't get along then. But if they only knew today, because a lot of people got passed on their ancestry. We just had to be silenced with it. If they only knew in the hood who they are, don't think that they don't know, because they talk about all this in jail. They talk about all this in the hood. Which is why when we go to what the Israeli, the female that did the statement press conference about 3 weeks ago, and she said that the black male youth are a problem. Why would she say that? They're not even over there. Why would she call the Palestinians black? Because that's where her problem is, right? We know that the Africans not given them no problem over there. That's Ham's descendants. The land is about Shem's descendants. That's not, Israel was created in 1948. So why would she reference the black male youth? Haven't they did enough in the United States to incarcerate them? Keep them constantly fighting each other? Hasn't there been enough on TV and in the music to talk about lean and whatever stuff, whatever has happened? Don't they already believe that all of that's working? So why would they still think that the black male youth is a threat? Why do you think alternative lifestyles are being pushed? And then you still don't have any fear of God, as if He's not looking, that you would even do that to who His chosen people are. You think that, so that gives you, you got to think now, it's a play of good and bad. Good and bad. That's what's going on. Because if they don't care about repercussion from God, then who are they representing? Let me continue. By 1713, March 20th through the 23rd, another force from South Carolina consisting of 900 Indians and 33 clear people. That lets you know that they really don't have the manpower. They can't procreate even today, which is another problem. They already warned you that they knew that their numbers were down before 2019. And now there's a push for removal of books, or banning of books, banning of education, banning of African American history. African American history reclassification is the history of the American Indian. March 20th through the 23rd, another force from South Carolina consisting of 900 Indians and 33 clear people begins a 3-day siege on the Tuscarora stronghold of Fort Neoheroka. Approximately 950 Tuscarora are unalived or captured and sold into slavery, effectively defeating the tribe and opening the interior of the colony to clear settlement. It happened in 1713. When I first read this a year ago, I cried, because I think that month I had found out about my Tuscarora great grandmother, Susan Parks. Reread that again. 1713, March 20th through the 23rd, another force from South Carolina consisting of 900 Indians and 33 clear people begins a 3-day siege on the Tuscarora stronghold of Fort Neoheroka. Approximately 950 Tuscarora, who, whether they were women and men, could no longer create to populate the Tuscarora. If they had children still living and they made it, they probably were in the woods somewhere, or they went north. Remember, many went north, or surrendered to slavery, which that's what I believe happened to Susan Parks. Tuscarora are unalived or captured and sold into slavery. They're not African. Effectively defeating the tribe and opening the interior of the colony to clear settlement. Although a few renegades fight on until 1715, that means another 2 years they continued. This war began in the 1500s, 200 plus years of fighting for their land, their children, and their lives. So you think they want to just give you some reparations? I mean, they know their ancestors did that, and then that money is power for them. Those laws and those law books are power against you for them. It is sad. Then you have those with that Spaniard blood in them, that has that same mind frame and think more like them than that Israelite African blood that's in their system. All right. Although a few renegades fight on until 1715, most surviving Tuscarora migrate north to rejoin the Iroquois League as its sixth and smallest nation. The ones that went north already had given up. Although some of the Tuscarora that were in North Carolina heard about some of the Tuscarora fighting in New York and went up there to help them? Yeah, they ain't saying nothing about that. Now, do you think some of them from the north came down there and helped them in 1713? 1715, a treaty with remaining North Carolina Tuscaroras signed. So 3 years later, they signed the treaty. They are placed on a reservation along the Pamlico River. The Coree and the Machapunga Indians, Tuscarora allies, settled in Hyde County near Lake Mattamusket, took their land, made them cohabitate somewhere else. The land will be granted to them in 1727 and a reservation will be established. Imagine someone taking your land and telling you, we have this land here, this is what we're going to give you, is reserved for you, and that's all you're going to get. And then these same people then were granted hundreds of acres because they took the land. And then they were able to pass all those acres of stolen land, broken treaties, false treaties, on to their ancestors today that go into public offices and continue to write laws that stop you from getting that land, stop you from benefiting at all, or elevation, or financial gain. My mind goes back to, they don't care nothing about what God say, do they? They think God don't see them. So I battle with them right there with what God are they serving? We can't be serving the same God. All right, continue. The General Assembly enacts a law denying blacks and Indians the right to vote. This is 715. Now, why you got to deny blacks the right to vote? Because you already know if you saying blacks are slaves, they can't be voting in 1715 now. So why are you denying them rights? That's because the Indians and the Moors and the Africans the few Africans that was brought over here, they kind of look alike. So they have to write a law that stops that. Nobody can come and say that they are an Indian. So this is before Plecker. Now, I'm not for certain if they put the blacks on there, but there you have it. The king will repeal the law in 1737. So it's saying in 22 years from 1715, the king will relook at the law to see if they need to retract it, or what do you call it when you cancel the law? Some free African Americans wasn't a term. So as you see, some free African Americans, that term didn't get started until probably 79. They probably was working on it then, went into effect probably 82, 83. I remember when it went into effect. I remember when we were called colored and then Black Americans. Some free African Americans will continue to vote until disfranchisement in 1835. So anybody from 1737 to 1835, they saw anybody with brown skin, black skin, anybody said that they was an Indian, they couldn't vote. Well, if you vote, what happens? We already know that today. If you don't vote, if you vote, you're able to vote for laws in your favor. That's why you can't vote. That's why there's restriction on vote. And then you got people that walk around today that laugh at stuff like that because they benefit from it. 1717, the few Tuscarora remaining in the colony led by Tom Blount, Blount. Remember, he signed my fifth great grandmother's marriage license. He didn't sign the second one. Are granted land on Ronicky River in Bertie County near present-day Quitsna or Kaitsna. This is 1777. Well, Blount signed it because she was, I think she was born in 1813. I'm not for certain. So a Blount, a Blount ancestor of Tom Blount signed it. It says the Tuscarora left their reservation on the Pamlico River because of raids by tribes from the south, which means the Seminole or any other tribes. So the Yamasee, remember the Yamasee is doing what they're doing. South Carolina has the Cherokee, so that's who they're talking about. 1721, a Cherokee ceded land northwest of Charleston in the colony of South Carolina. So guess what they did? They used the Cherokee to combat the Tuscarora on the side of the British and at times the Spanish. But by 1721, here they are giving up land. Matter of fact, Charleston. The first of many land cessions the Cherokee made to Europeans. The Cherokees extended into Alabama and Georgia as well. The treaty also regulates trade and establishes a boundary between the Cherokee and European settlers. So I guess they ain't even bother fighting them. They just, I don't know. Let me stop because there are so many Indian wars. All right, 1726. Had they stuck together, like the black people today are all at each other's throats. How do you do that? Division. How do you do that? You get someone to say, I love everybody. I ain't with none of that. They don't bother me. I'm cool with them. Do you know I know 70-year-old people that say this? I know 25-year-old people, 18, 15-year-olds. By 1726 through 1739, the Shuwa Indians incorporate with the Catawba, I forgot how to pronounce that. Catawba, I forgot how to pronounce that. Catawba, let me look it up. I forgot how. I'm thinking about OGB though. I just probably panicking. That's probably what I'm doing. Okay. I'm not gonna look it up because I believe I'm just panicking. Okay, let me get better with it. Catawba. Incorporate with the Catawba living near present-day Charlotte. So you think all the people in Charlotte, North Carolina is Africans? You know how many people, because they brown skin, think they are Africans when Indians came darker than an African? Imagine that. There's a lot more people know than not. 1730, Cherokee leaders visit London and confer with the king. Cherokee leaders leave the Americas and go to London to talk to a king, another person on another continent about their land. They pledged friendship to the English and agreed to return runaway slaves, not Africans, but other Indians who were fighting viciously in these wars to keep their lands and their families and tribes and bands intact. But the Cherokee, they pledged friendship to the English and agreed to return runaway slaves and to trade exclusively with the British. So forget trading with the Yamasee. Forget trading with the Saponi. Forget trading with the Oneida. Forget them. Forget the Potawatomi and the Shawnee and the Pamunkey. Forget the Tuscarora. Forget all of them. You come trade with us because we like you. 1736, the North Carolina colony establishes an Indian Trade Commission to regulate trade with indigenous peoples. To regulate trade. Now, all that bartering and trading is over with. That means we need to know how many fish you fish, how many squash you harvest, what you sell it for. There's now an Indian Trade Commission to not only regulate it, some of those items were prohibited, like horses and bison. Hunting, you need a license. Trading, actually, you need a license. Kind of, sort of. Don't quote me on that. And then charge you for a license. Totally destroying culture. So those talking about they practicing today, talking about how so if they stopped all of that? A whole generation of people were stopped. And then Christianity was force fed. And religion was taken away from you. How then are you able to do the powwows? Where did that tradition come from? Who taught you that? Because in Illinois, you can't even buy seeds. I went to buy seeds in 2002. And someone from Home Depot told me that they were banned for selling seeds in the state of Illinois. (1736) The North Carolina colony establishes an Indian Trade Commission to regulate trade with the Aborigine peoples. Remember, they are slaves and prisoners of war. To this date, their descendants are also. 1738 through 1739. A smallpox epidemic decimates the Indian population in North Carolina. Where did smallpox come from? Especially in the eastern part of the colony. The epidemic decreases the number of Cherokee by 50%. Now, in their minds, they still think that they done wipe people out. You know how many people ran to mountains, to other tribes, whether ended up being black, or slaves, reclassified before Plecker even got involved? Use your head. I'm going to go ahead and allow you to take a couple of minutes on a break. I'm not going to shut this down. I'm not going to quit. returning. For you to catch up with me on the screen. All right. So, 1738 through 1739, a smallpox epidemic decimates the Indian population of North Carolina, especially in the eastern part of the colony. The epidemic decreases the number of Cherokee by 50%. We go into 1740, the Waxhaw Indians, decimated by smallpox, abandoned their lands in present-day Union County and joined the Catawba, Catawba, the Catawba. The vacated lands are taken up by none other than Germans, English, Scottish, and Welsh immigrants. 1750, armed conflicts arise between the Cherokee and colonists. Now the Cherokee got to fight. At first they were helping them. Then they freely gave up their land. Now by 1750, when they didn't help everybody else, now they have armed conflicts arising between the Cherokee and colonists who continue to expand areas of settlement further into the western part of the colony. Know why? Because they began to take back the land that they promised the Cherokee. 1754 through 1763, the French and Indian War is fought between England and France all along the frontier of North America. North Carolina troops served both in North Carolina and in other colonies. 1755, the Indian population in eastern North Carolina is estimated at around 356. Don't be a fool. You got to know that some of them left the area. They survived. We are here. Most of these are Tuscarora who have not moved north. The colonial governor approves a proposal to establish an Indian academy in present-day Sampson County. 1758, North Carolina militia and Cherokee assist the British military. There they go. They back friends with them in campaigns against the French and Shawnee Indians. Remember, the Shawnee tribe is Pocahontas's brothers and father's tribe, the Shawnee, the Pamunkey. They were even, there's Cherokee even in there with the cornstalk, Mortoy. So the Cherokee decide to change sides after receiving ill treatment by the English, and they return home, where they eventually attack North Carolina colonists. After all of that they did, 1759, the French and Indian War intensifies as the Cherokee raid the western Piedmont. Refugees crowd into the fort at Bethabara. Typhus kills or unalives many refugees and Moravians there. A second smallpox epidemic devastates the Catawba tribe, reducing the population by half. 1760, an act of assembly permits North Carolinians serving against Indian allies of the French to enslave captives. So 1760, they put into law, anybody that's in North Carolina that's fighting the Indians, this war is going into 300 years, anyone that serves against the Indians If you caught an Indian or a Frenchman, you can enslave them. So these slaves were not Africans, folks. February 1760, Cherokee attacked Fort Dobbs and cleared settlements near Bethabara and along the Yadkin and Dan rivers. June, an army of British regulars and American militia under Colonel Archibald Montgomery destroys Cherokee villages and saved the Fort Prince George garrison in South Carolina, but is defeated by the Cherokee at Echo. But in August, Cherokee captured Fort Loudon in Tennessee and massacred the garrison. Many of the Cherokee and the Pawnee, the Shawnee and the Pamunkey, many of them fled to Tennessee. The Tuscarora great-grandmother that I have, that's where her people are currently today. That's where her mother was, who looks exactly like an Indian. And that would be her great-grandmother, Susan Parks. 1761, June, an army of British regulars, American militia, and Catawba and Chickasaw Indians under Colonel James Grant defeats the Cherokee and destroys 15 villages, ending Cherokee resistance. Which means that the Cherokee helped take down the Chickasaw. In December, the Cherokee signed a treaty ending their war with the American colonists. Do you see a pattern of getting more men and more Indians to help defeat other tribes? That's how the land got taken. Had the Indians not been against each other, no matter what the tribe and bands, this wouldn't have never taken place. 1763, King George III issues a proclamation that demarcates the western edge of settlement. This proclamation line through western North Carolina is meant to separate the Indians and the colonists. Imagine a king is overseas, a person is overseas, has someone take over land from the people that they know are the Israelites, because everyone already knew. And they take over the land and say, oh, you can't come over here and you can't come over there. Imagine that. They are fighting for over 200 plus years for their lands and their lives. February, the Treaty of Paris ends the 7 Years' War in Europe and French and Indian War in North America. So in France, the Europe and the French were fighting for 7 years. And then they also had Indian wars in North America. By 1775, the Treaty of Sycamore Shoals, now Elizabethton, Tennessee, between Richard Henderson and the Henderson town is where my ancestors that are Pocahontas went to the town of Henderson in Tennessee. Between Richard Henderson of the Transylvania Company and the Cherokee people is signed. It opens for settlement the area from the Ohio River south to the Watauga settlement. The Shawnee people who inhabit the lands refused to accept the terms of the treaty. They took that land. These are my ancestors. It's just overwhelming. 1747 through 1776, the Kohari, Catawba, and ancestors of the Lumbee joined the Patriot cause. 1776, May through June, Cherokee Village councils discuss going to war against the American colonists. The Cherokee decide to fight, knowing that the consequences are enormous. However, the Cherokee are fighting to protect the existence of their society, so they ignore the overwhelming odds against them. June, white settlements in Watauga in South Carolina are raided by the Cherokee, allies of the British, who have promised to protect the Indians from encroachments by colonial borders. July 29th, November through November. General Griffith Rutherford with 2,400 men invades Cherokee Country, destroying 32 towns and villages. Wow, the Cherokee had 32 towns. I thought they teepee people. All right, keep believing what the people said, got circulating around. You know good and well they ain't had towns if they were building pyramids. Rutherford is joined by Colonel Andrew Williamson with South Carolina troops and Colonel William Christian with Virginians. This expedition breaks the power of the Cherokee and forces them to sue for peace. 1777, July 20th, by the Treaty of Long Island of Holston, the Cherokee cede territory east of the Blue Ridge and along the Watauga, Nolichucky, Upper Holston, and New Rivers, the area east of present-day Kingsport and Greensville, Tennessee. The Cherokee had land in Tennessee. 1783, despite the Indian Treaty of 1777, fixing the boundary at the foot of the Blue Ridge, the Assembly declares lands open for settlement as far west as the Pigeon River. 1791, July 2nd, the Cherokee signed the Treaty of Holston, by which they cede a 100-mile tract of land in exchange for goods and annuity of only $1,000. Took 100 miles of land. These treaties took place all over the lands where they took the land. They did not have allies because the other tribes were befriended and allies of the British and the French. That's how they took the land. 1798, October 2nd, by the Treaty of Tellico, the Cherokee cede a triangular area with its points near Indian Gap, east of present-day Brevard, and southeast of Asheville. We're going into the 1800s, 19th century American Indian history. 1808, the Cherokee established a law code and the Light Horse Guards to maintain law and order. 1810, the Cherokee abolished clan revenge as a mechanism for social control. That means they ended up breaking up because they knew if they did the Indian route of revenge, it would wipe out totally. They had no allies, wiped them out totally. So they began to establish social constraints, abandoning the way of war took place. 1814, March 27, Cherokee Indians and General Andrew Jackson is defeating the Creek Indians. Remember, the Creeks, the Muskogee, their entire bands are in Alabama fighting for their land and life. Cherokee Indians then go 4 years later, after crying and whining, General Andrew Jackson in defeating the Creek Indians in the Battle of Horseshoe Bend in Alabama. After the battle, Jackson tells the Cherokee chief, Junaluska, as long as the sun shines and the grass grows, there shall be friendship between us, and the feet of the Cherokee shall be toward the east. That's why they have the horseshoe casinos. That's why you have the bands of Native Americans who have mixed with the Mongolians, who are now Native Americans on the reservations, arguing with the full-blooded, reclassified all over about reparations and who are the Indians. Because they already know the agreements that bound them to lands, reparations, monies, and everything else. So you don't think they kept those traditions going against their allies? So as president, Jackson later plays a major role in the effort to move the Cherokee west. Where they finna go? Where are they about to go? 1817, the Cherokee cede land in exchange for the land on the Arkansas River, and 2,000 Cherokee move west. 1819, the Cherokee agreed to a treaty by which a large amount of their land in present-day Henderson, Transylvania, and Jackson counties is ceded to the federal government. Henderson County in Tennessee is now a forest preserve on the lake, resorts, that sort of thing. Taken from, because my ancestors lived on in Henderson County. The Cherokee, and Pocahontas' sister did as well. That's my ancestor. The Cherokee are allowed to receive land grants as individuals and can resell the land only to clear settlers to earn money. They can't sell it to an African. They can't sell their lands to another Indian. They can only sell to settlers. 1820, the Cherokee established a judicial administration and 8 judicial districts because they were free. They had their organizations of bands, but for the most part, they were living in peace. Now they're forced to form judicial systems in which the government helped to implement and to tell them what they need to put into the laws. 1821, Sequoyah completes his work of establishing the Cherokee alphabet. Remember, the Hebrew alphabet is now the Cherokee alphabet. Confusing the languages now. Disattaching them from culture. Disassociation from culture and heritage. Remember, you need to be civilized. That means you need to now, whatever they expect you to be within the realms of civilization rules, that is what makes a civilized person. So it's whatever they say. Not that the person wasn't behaving correctly from the beginning. They just were not doing what they wanted them to do, and they actually wanted them to just not fight them back when they were trying to take the land. So making the Cherokee people the only group of American Indians to have a written language, when guess what? They are the Hebrews, the Israelites, so they already had the Hebrew language. They already were writing on all the buildings and leaving them behind on the stones and at the mounds and at the pyramids across the United States and in South America, Florida. So what do they mean? All right, 1822, the Cherokee Nation Supreme Court is established. You are beginning to see where not Walter Plecker. What is it? The Dawes Roll is beginning to take place, because at first I've seen Indian rolls in 2017 with nothing but Indian names, not American names, not European names, not Smith and Johnson and Blacksmith and Taylor and all of that. That's not in those documents before the Dawes Roll. We're talking about Indian rolls with the Indian names that were Hebrew names. I've seen those. So now you're beginning to see the Dawes rolls is beginning to be created, because they have other Indian rolls, like the Cherokee Indian rolls. They have the Seminole Indian rolls. They have whoever they granted or had an agent go out and take that logistic, document that logistics. 1822, remember again, the Cherokee National Supreme Court is established. 1827, the Cherokee approve a new tribal constitution. 1828, the first edition of the Cherokee Phoenix, a newspaper printed in Cherokee and English, is released. 1830, President Andrew Jackson signs the Indian Removal Act, calling for American Indians to be forced from their homes to lands west of the Mississippi. 1830, the Indian Removal Act. Who are those Indians? Because a lot of the agents had children with Indians, making those children have or a small percentage of Indian. They are European. The goal was to put them on the Oklahoma territory, to make them civilized, and also until they are able to suffice for themselves a right ideology. This is in records, and no longer needed any help. 2023, they're still on the reservations. So much for that. 1835, the state constitution is extensively revised, with amendments approved by the voters that provide for the direct election of the governor and more democratic representation in the legislature. However, new laws take voting rights away from American Indians and free blacks. Well, if you vote, you end up voting out the party that's running, right? Those that's running for election. You'll get your land back then, right? You'll be able to vote them out. So you really think they're gonna approve voting rights or your vote count? I'm not saying not to vote. I'm just saying, I just want you to think about it. A small unauthorized group of men signed the Cherokee Removal Treaty. The Cherokee Protester Treaty. That means a small unauthorized group of men. Now remember, the Cherokee is known for doing all this type of stuff. Now they teed off because a small unauthorized group went to sign a Cherokee Removal Treaty when they was doing that for 300-400 years. The Cherokee Protester Treaty and Chief John Ross collects more than 15,000 signatures, representing nearly the entire Cherokee population, on a petition requesting the United States to withhold ratification. 1836, the Senate approves the Cherokee Removal Treaty by one vote. 1838, approximately 17,000 North Carolina Cherokee are forcibly removed from the state to the Indian Territory, present-day Oklahoma. This event becomes known as the Trail of Tears. A lot of them are mixed. How do I know? Because they're in my tree. An estimated 4,000 Cherokee people passed away during the 1,200-mile trek. A few hundred Cherokee refused to be rounded up and transported. I doubt if it's just a few hundred Cherokee, because everybody wasn't going along with, I don't know. When you think about how the Cherokee did go along with some stuff, okay, but guess what? Those Cherokees that didn't go along with it, you better believe they, as it says here, a few hundred Cherokee refused to be rounded up and transported. They hide in the mountains and evade federal soldiers. Eventually, a deal is struck between the army and the remaining Cherokee. Toussaint, a leading Cherokee brave, agrees to surrender himself to General Winfield Scott. And Scott is one of the names that they were forced to, which is part of the Powhatan, Pamunkey, the Shawnee tribes. That is the last name that was given to them in the indoctrination, the removal of their American name, their Merry Indian name to the English name Scott. To be shot if the army will allow the rest of his people to stay in North Carolina legally. That is one of Pocahontas's relatives. The Scott is, I know the Scott as being her sister's children. The federal government eventually establishes a reservation for the Eastern Band of Cherokee. So he thought really, really quick. That's good. So that's where the Eastern Band of Cherokee came from, because that general who was a Cherokee he put his life on the line to ask for his life in exchange for the Cherokee not leaving the North Carolina area and going to Oklahoma. 1839, Yanaguska, chief of Eastern Band of Cherokee, passes away at age 80. His adopted white son, William Holland Thomas, I told you. They just put it there what color the sun is. So that's 1839. We're going to the 1900s. We're going to the 2000s. What do you think is on those reservations? Full-blooded Amerindians or admixed Amerindians? His adopted clear son, William Holland Thomas, becomes chief of the Cherokee and fights to secure reservation land for them. Now remember, he has the ideology of who his father is, or whoever was the clear person. That's who they want to man the lands. That is who control the lands today. That is who's saying you're ridiculous, you're not an Indian. That is who's not stepping outside of reality and saying they know that other Indians exist that have not been admixed. So when you ask for reparations, this is why they're fighting. 1840, the General Assembly passes a law prohibiting Indians from carrying or owning weapons without first obtaining a license. That's where the licenses come from. That's why you have other races that boast ownership of weapons, and then they also try to control the Black communities with weapons by actually creating conditions within those communities and neighborhoods, such as poverty, lack of employment, mistreatment, discrimination. You throw all that in, and then throw in the weapons. That's a recipe for disaster. 1842, those Cherokee who avoided forced removal in 1838 and remained in North Carolina are given citizenship. In 1848, Congress grants them a small amount of money to use for the purchase of land. Remember, this was their land. So they call themselves giving them some money to repurchase the land that they took from them. 1859, the Kahari community establishes subscription schools for Indian children. 1861, they were tortured in those schools. Their hair were cut. Their native tongue was beaten out of them and scared out of them and tortured out of them. Many were not fed. They were ridiculed. Chores, overworking, underfed, physically, and abused on so many different levels. 1859, the Kahari community establishes subscription schools for Indian schools. 1861 through 1865, approximately 42,000 North Carolinians lose their lives in the Civil War. They did all that fighting only 2 years later have to go to another war because of what they did to the Indians. That was an Indian war. That wasn't an African slave war. The Civil War wasn't an African slave war. It was to free the American Indians and any African slaves. Aborigines, Indigenous, have varying experiences during the war. Many Cherokee in Western North Carolina support the Confederacy. Thomas's Legion, a well-known fighting unit, has 2 companies of Cherokee soldiers. The Lumbee in Eastern North Carolina are treated quite differently. They are forced to work on Confederate fortifications near Wilmington. Many flee and form groups to resist impressment by the army. Henry Berry Lowry, the Lowrys are Tuscareans as well, leads one such group which continues to resist clear domination long after the war's end. 1865, March 3rd, the unalivings of Allen and William Lowry, the father and brother of Henry Berry Lowry, sparked what becomes known as the Lowry War in Robeson County. Those are Tuscareans. 1865 through 1874, the Lowry Band employs guerrilla tactics in its wars against Robeson County's power structure, robbing prominent citizens and unaliving law enforcement officers. Indians, blacks, and poor whites unite in support of the outlaw group. The Lowry Band is Tuscarean Indians. Just in case you didn't know that. 1872, February, Henry Berry Lowry vanishes, leading to years of speculation about his unaliving. 1874, the unaliving of Steve Lowry at the hand of bounty hunters. Now you're beginning to get bounty people, bounty hunters. They are sent in and paid money to find people that specific people want. The Lowry Wars ends. 1875, the North Carolina Constitution is changed, giving free men of color over the age of 21 the right to vote. 1882, early 1900s, the 3 schools are established in Halifax and Warren counties to serve Haliwa-Saponi children. And remember, for the Chickasaw, the Chickasaw was carried from Mississippi over into Georgia, the very top, through Alabama, through Georgia, and the North Carolinas. That was their trail. That was their route. That's where their houses were. 1885, children. 1885, February 10th. The state recognizes the Croatan Indians, now known as the Lumbee. So the Lumbee is a Croatan tribe. I have to do my research on that because I did not know. I definitely knew that the Lumbee was supposedly Tuscarora. So I've already verified my Lumbee tribe via my true ancestry. All right. The state recognizes the Croatan Indians, now known as the Lumbee, as an official American Indian tribe. With recognition comes separate schools for Indian students. And remember, when you're applying for tribal enrollment, it has to be your maternal. Tribes are maternal. So you take on the maternal lineage. 1887. Remember, those Dawes rolls are taking place. They're the Indian rolls. All of that is taking place. They're registering people. The censuses have went into effect. 1887, a normal school for Indians opened in Pembroke, Robinson County. This school evolves into the present-day University of North Carolina at Pembroke. 1888, Hamilton Macmillan publishes Sir Walter's Lost Colony. Macmillan, the publisher, that's where the Macmillans and the publishers come from. If you look on the back of your children's books, Macmillan, McGraw, those are your publishers. They actually ended up changing what is inside those books, resulting in a lot of children focus or attention spans not where they should be because they couldn't understand what was in the books. And then I've seen some of the books in 95 that was so confusing and meant to be confusing. It was okay. Which claims that Lumbee Indians are descended from the ill-fated Cherokee settlers. So to stop the Lumbee from inheriting anything, he spreaded a rumor. Remember, the state recognized them. They're the Crotons and the Lumbee. I guarantee you are nothing more than Tuscaroreans. But by 1888, Macmillan says, oh, those Lumbee Indians are descended from Cherokee settlers, trying to say that they are white. They're not. So he intentionally did that. And for over 100 years now, the Macmillan publishers and the McGuire publishers, okay, so they're used to coming up with stuff and making up stuff. All right, let me stop. December 4th, 54 Croatan Indians in Robeson County petitioned the federal government requesting funds for schools. The Indians of Persian County construct a school on land donated by Green Martin. Martin is the name, one of these surnames of those that are at the Coctotan iron furnace. Now, remember the 1700s, the iron furnace began to be, it was created. And all the wars that took place. How do you think those people got on that furnace as workers? You think they was just African, as they're saying? Because that's what they're trying to say, that they're African. Okay, 1887, a normal school for Indians opened in Pembroke, Robinson County. The school evolves into the present-day University of North Carolina at Pembroke. 1888, Hamilton Macmillan publishes I read that, right? Publishes Sir Walter's Lost Colony, which claims that Lumbee Indians are descended from the ill-fated Cherokee settlers. I don't know why they did it again, but they petitioned for another school to be constructed. 1889, the Eastern Band of Cherokee is incorporated under North Cherokee law. 20th century American Indian history, 1904. Diotrian W. and Mary Epps deed land for a school for Indians. Oh, they're so nice that they're giving them a school, giving them land for a school. They took the land, but I'm gonna give you some land out of the out of the out of my heart. I feel for them that they need to be educated. So I'm gonna donate land to them. You see the mindset for Indians in Persian County, North Carolina, and Southern Virginia. The school will be rebuilt in 1925 by Persian County, North Carolina, and Halifax County, Virginia. 1910, Shiloh Indian School is established in Dismal Township, Sampson County, to serve Kohari children. 1911, you know why they sent to those schools? Because they didn't want any more Indians from those tribes uprising. So they had to break them of the culture, break them of the spirit, break them of knowing about all of the Indian fights that were passed along to them. That's why they were placed in schools. 1911, March 8th, a North Carolina law changes the name of the Croton Indians to the Indians of Robeson County. The Kahari received state recognition, but this recognition is rescinded 2 years later. The state of North Carolina names recognizes a group of Indians descended from the Saponi, Totelo, and Occaneechi tribes as the Indians of Persian County. Now, you will now see after all of those wars, they are now feeling comfortable with coming forward, but they have to go to the government to get anything. The other tribes are now becoming civilized, so they can't communicate how they used to. They can't even talk about uprising because they're now decolonized. I mean, not decolonized, but they're now indoctrinated, forced assimilation. Some of them might not even be them, might be paid. But we believe that the paid $5 ones was taking place in Oklahoma and when you start going back to the Spaniards. State recognition will be rescinded in the 1970s. New Bethel Indian School is established in New Bethel Township, Sampson County, to serve Kohari children, to break them of the spirit of the Indian, of the Aboriginal. To break. 1913, March 11. The Indians of Robeson County changed their name to Cherokee Indians of Robeson County. 1917, Eastern Carolina Indian School is established in Heron Township, Sampson County. The school will operate until school desegregation in 1966, eventually serving children in grades 1 through 12. In 1942, the children begins accepting children from Indian communities in other eastern North Carolina counties. By this time, they are assimilated or forced indoctrinated, including Harnett, Hokie, Columbus, Cumberland, Bladen, and Person. Person is another name that is within the tree that is tied to the Tuscaroran tribes. 1925, Cherokee lands are placed in trust status with the federal government. So if you have any relatives that came from there, the land is still in trust. 1934, Wide Awake Indian School opens in the Waccamaw Soin community of Buckhead in Bladen County with Wilton Lowry at Lumbee as teacher. The school, serving students in grades 1 through 8, follows the tradition of Doughhead School, founded in 1885, Long Boy School, founded in 1901, and St. Mark's School, founded in 1920. It will close in 1952. 1935, a federal memorandum allows Indians in Robeson County to organize under the Wheeler Howard Indian Reorganization Act of 1934. The Wheelers are in my tree. The DNA of the Wheelers today are in my tree, as well as the DNA matches. To receive recognition, individuals must at least be one half Indian. So now you're beginning to see the blood quantum as a requirement to say that you are an Indian, even though they are the ones who came and intentionally whitewashed the tribe. 1838, December 12th, only 22 of 209 Robeson County Indians qualify for recognition under the Wheeler-Howard Act of 1934. There's always something. Qualifications is based on race, testing to determine an individual's Indian blood. Walter Plecker is already working in these government offices, doing everything that they can so that the disattachment from the Indian race, because the Indian race is connected to treaties and land. So you have to wipe out that race by creating another race, eliminating the culture and from the tribes, from the lineage. 1939, the Indian Normal School, now the University of North Carolina in Pembroke in Robeson County, grants its first college degree. 1942, East Carolina Indian School is established in Sampson County to serve American Indians in 7 surrounding countries. The school will close in 1965. 1947, the first Indian mayor of the town of Pembroke is elected. Previously, the governor appointed the mayors, all of whom were non-Indian. 1950, the Cherokee Historical Association receives funding, and the first performance of the outdoor drama Unto These Hills takes place. 1952 through 1954, Waccamaw Indian School opens in Columbus County. The school will close in 1969 following the desegregation of North Carolina schools. 1953, the state of North Carolina recognizes the Lumbee, formerly called the Cherokee of Robeson County. 1954, the Hickory Hill School in Waccamaw Sion community of St. James, Columbus County closes after having operated since at least 1927. 1956, Columbus passes the Lumbee Bill, which recognizes the Lumbee as an Indian tribe but denies them services from the Bureau of Indian Affairs. 1957, the Halawa School opens in Warren County, serving children in grades 1 through 12. The school is tribally controlled. That brought tears to my eyes when they denied the Lumbee tribe. The school is tribally controlled and state recognized under the county school system. It will close in 1970 as a result of school desegregation. 1958, January 18th, a large group of Lumbee, angered by racist agitation and threats of cross burnings, descend on a Ku Klux Klan rally near Maxton, scattering the Klan. 2 Klan members are later indicted on charges of incitement to riot. June, English E. Jones becomes the first Lumbee president of Pembroke State College, now the University of North Carolina at Pembroke. 1965, the Halawa received state recognition as an Indian tribe. 1970s, the General Assembly, in removing obsolete laws from the books, inadvertently rescinds state recognition of the Indians of Person County. I'm going to reread that again. 1970s, the General Assembly, in removing obsolete laws from the books, inadvertently rescinds state recognition of the Indians of Persian County. The state recognizes the Kahari and the Waccamaw tribes. What a mistake, huh? Or you think it's a mistake. July 2nd, the General Assembly establishes the North Carolina Commission of Indian Affairs. Bruce Jones of Lumbee serves as director. December 22nd, the Lumbee Bank is established in Pembroke. It is the first bank in the United States owned and operated by Indians. 1972, August, the new Department of American Indian Studies at Pembroke State University, now the University of North Carolina at Pembroke, begins offering courses. The Carolina Indian Voice, an Indian-owned newspaper, begins operation. September, Horace Locklear, who is a Tuscaroran, a Lumbee, becomes the first Indian to practice law in North Carolina. October, Tuscarora from Robeson County joined other Indians from across the nation in occupying the Bureau of Indian Affairs building in Washington, D.C. during the Trail of Broken Treaties protest. The Tuscarora steal 7,200 pounds of records from the building and bring them to Robeson County. 1973, March 18th, Old Main, the oldest building on the campus of Pembroke State College, now the University of North Carolina at Pembroke, is gutted by fire. So that means that they probably retaliated from, somebody retaliated 5 months later. 8 months later. The oldest building on the campus of the Pembroke State University, now the University of North Carolina at Pembroke, is gutted by fire. The building is reconstructed and will eventually house the Department of American Indian Studies and the Native American Resource Center. March 19th, Henry Ward Oxendine, a Lumbee from Robeson County, becomes the first American Indian to serve in the General Assembly in North Carolina. September 5th, the Rutherford Aborigine Indigenous Association incorporates in Greensboro. 1976, January 5th, the Metrolina Native American Association incorporates in Charlotte. As you can see, the label Native American, which is not a nationality, is now being used as a phrase. That's because after World War II, the Siberian, Asian Ukrainians began to come into the United States. You have Ellis Island. You have people beginning to come over and now being deemed Native American. You have instances and events of $5 Indians. People placed on the reservation, assuming identities All of this is taking place. We're getting into this 1976. The Wakama Sion tribe begins governing by tribal council and tribal chief. 1986, the Meherrin Indian tribe receives recognition from the North Carolina Commission of Indian Affairs. 1988, February 1st, two Tuscarora Indians, Eddie Hatcher and Timothy Jacobs, hold 17 people hostage in the offices of the Robesonian newspaper in Lumberton. The two demand to speak with Governor Jim Martin. Martin is in my tree, which means, remember I pointed out that the governors between Virginia, Maryland, Pennsylvania, and North Carolina had had people, enslaved people, and had forced them to work at the iron furnace. And it's the Tuscarora Indians that they did that to. And yesterday, after yesterday's live, I ended up seeing something where it says that although, because originally they're telling people that they are Africans. Oh, no, I take that back. All 99, two of them are not. Two of them are all European, come out of the burial remains in at the furnace, leaving 25. Three of them are supposed to be biracial, and now it's also being determined that those three are of Indian blood. But they stated that it's only a 7% of it is hogwash. I read that after closing out, shutting it out my live yesterday, ending it. And I can bring that up. So I got to look for it. All right. So we get into 1988. That's not that far away. I graduated high school 87. Had no idea that I had Tuscarora blood in me. Had no idea that I had relatives from North Carolina, Virginia, Maryland, none of that. Bahamas, what they lead you to believe is that you're from Mississippi or as a slave, an African slave at that. It's all hogwash. I'm going to reread it again. February 1st, two Tuscarora Indians, Eddie Hatcher and Timothy Jacobs, hold 17 people hostage in the offices of the Robesonian newspaper in Lumberton. The two demand to speak with Governor Jim Martin, hoping to publicize corruption and drug dealing among Robeson County's law enforcement officials. They will be acquitted of federal charges but convicted on state charges. Guess what that means? 1988. Guess what happened in all the black communities around the world? Around the nation. Pennsylvania, Philadelphia, Indiana, Mississippi, Chicago, California, Georgia, Florida, Tennessee. Drugs were dropped there. New York. This is around the time the war on drugs. So as you can see, in 1988, the Tuscarora Indians that were there knew what was happening, and they tried to bring attention to it. 1997, May, the General Assembly passes a bill restoring state recognition rescinded in the 1970s to the Indians of Persian County. November 1997, Harrah's Cherokee Casino opens on Keala Boundary Reservation with 175,000 square feet of space and 1,800 video gambling machines. I found out who owned all the casinos in 1980s, around the 87, 88. The whole chunk. That's a tribe. Potawatomi Casino, that's a tribe. Those are tribes. So what they did was came up with, okay, we'll let you have a betting organization, a gambling organization, legal gambling. And then they created the lottery system around that time as well. And who contributes the lit income that they have to the casinos and the lottery system? The descendants of that Amerindians. All right, so that is the timeline that had me in tears last year when I first saw it. I think it's like this is my second time reading it all the way to the end, or it might be my first, or whatever I've seen. But this is my first time seeing Lumbee, 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 Lumbee. Because remember, I didn't know anything about Lumbee until a month after finding this timeline. And I was brought to tears. And guess what? Not only do I be in tears, I'd be angry about what happened. So I just took you back to some of the Indian history of North Carolina. Because remember, there are other tribes, other Indian bands that have wars that you have to read about their heroes and their warriors of those wars. Because it didn't stop here. They had troops and militia all over that north and southeast coast of Mississippi, and states over west of the Mississippi, trying to take the land. So when you have time, please take the time to look and see what this is all about. Thank you for sticking with me. I was actually able, doing this research, to take you back to verify my ancestry of the Tuscarean and Lumbee tribe. Now, when I think about that fifth great grandmother, Susan Parks, it's just not enough information to see, because she married a clear man, and I guarantee you that was by force. But then they're telling you that somebody else is the relatives, and I see that a lot. Parks, Parkes or Parks, might not even be her last surname. I mean, her surname, maiden surname. But I have to remember that she wasn't in the 1700s. She was in the 1800s. She was actually in the 1800s. But the wars are still going on. The wars are still going on. So I was able to show you my true ancestry timeline of how I began the research of this North Carolina tribe. It originally was for the research of the Cactotan iron furnace. About 25 of the 27 burial sites that are there, which means, and it's a total of 5 families, which means that I am related to 25 of the people that are there. I actually was able to see a lot of the Indian chiefs and their names for further research. We learned a lot about the dates that all of this was going on. I'm just like flabbergasted with the findings, and this happens a lot when researching. Before I end, I'm gonna show you one more thing, which is coming from the Library of Congress. So you have to constantly cross-reference. I'm waiting for you to come on up on the screen with me. I ain't got up there yet. I don't know why. All right, here we go. Sorry about that. All right, here we go. All right, this is coming from the Library of Congress. George Washington wrote this letter he wrote this speech August 1st, 1756. It's a speech to the Tuscarora Indians, letters to Washington, and accompanying papers published by the Society of the Colonial Dames of America, edited by Stanislaus Murray Hamilton. Speech to the Tuscarora, 1756. Remember, this is nowhere near 1776. The war went on even in to 1988, might as well say. Imagine your ancestors going through all of this fighting to preserve land and life. All right, speech to the Tuscaroras, to King Blunt, Captain Jack, and the rest of the Tuscaroras chiefs. Brother and friends, this will be delivered you by our brother Tom, a warrior of the Nottaways, who with others of the nation have distinguished between themselves and our service this summer against our cruel and perfidious enemies. The intent of this is to assure you of our real friendship and love, and to confirm and strengthen that chain of friendship which has subsisted between us for so many ages past. A chain like ours, founded in sincere love and friendship, must be strong and lasting, and will, I hope, endure while sun and stars give light. Brothers, you can be no strangers to the many murders and cruelties committed on our countrymen and friends by that false and faithless people, the French, who are constantly endeavoring to corrupt the minds of our friendly Indians, and have stirred up the Shawnees and Delawares. And you have to remember, when the French abolished slavery, and what would be the purpose of them fighting? Were they fighting for some of the land? Because remember, the Spanish took over a lot of land. We're talking about the French. When did the French abolish slavery? And have stirred up the Shawnees and Delawares. There's Indians in the Delawares in New York now, with several all other nations to take up the hatchet against us. And at the head of many of these native Indians have invaded our country, laid waste our lands, plundered our plantations, unalived, defenseless women and children, and burnt and destroyed whatever they came, which has enraged our friends, the Six Nations, Cherokees, Nottaways, Catawbas, and all of our Indian allies, and prompted them to take up the hatchet in our defense against these disturbers of the commonplace. I hope, brothers, you will likewise take up the hatchet against the French and their Indians, as our other friends have done, and send us some of your young men to protect our frontiers and go to war with us against our restless, ambitious foes, and to encourage your brave warriors. I promise to furnish them with arms, ammunition, cloths, provisions, and every necessary for war. And the sooner you send them to our assistance, the greater mark will you give us of your friendship, and the better shall we be enabled to take our just revenge of their cruelties. May you live long, a happy and prosperous people, and may we act with mutual love and friendship while rivers run, where trees grow, is the sincere wish of your friend and brother and prosperous people. And may we act with mutual love and friendship. Again, while rivers run or trees grow is the sincere wish of your friend and brother. G, in confirmation of the above, and in hopes of your compliance with my request, I give you this string of rum pump. This is coming from George Washington's August 1st, 1756 speech to the Tuscarora Indians, letters to Washington, and accompanying papers published by the Society of the Colonial Dames of America, edited by Stanislaw Murray Hamilton, located at the Library of Congress.gov. All right, so the Tuscaroras were originally of the Iroquois Confederacy, but before the advent of the Europeans in America had separated themselves and settled in North Carolina. They were divided into 7 clans, and in 1700 occupied 15 villages and numbered about 4,000 souls. In 1711 and 1713, they made desperate war upon the Clear people, but were subdued and greatly lessened in numbers. The remainder fled northward and again allied themselves in the 5 nations constituting the 6 nations. The Iroquois League in 1763, Sir William Johnson estimated this once powerful tribe to number only 700 souls. That's what they say. Nobody's gonna stick around for war. If they're not winning, they're gonna try to get away and flee for safety. So that will conclude going over the timeline of the North Carolina Indians. And thank you for taking this virtual tour and journey with me. You see that I was able to match myself to the Lumbee tribe with my true ancestry DNA and my 5th great grandmother maternal lineage in my tree, and that is in yesterday's video. So I will go ahead and conclude. Thank you for sticking with me this long. I didn't know it was going to go over into it, but I think it is well worth it. That timeline gets long when it's reading, but the information is interesting, and as you can see that there were more timelines. In addition to this, there are treaties that are with the Library of Congress that I often read. So thank you and good night.